The GPS said, "Continue to save destination," and I almost drove off the road. I had borrowed Marcus's car that Tuesday morning because mine was in the shop, something with the alternator. $42 to diagnose and 3 days to fix. It was a nothing errand. I was going to pick up dry cleaning on Birchwood Avenue, maybe stop at the Trader Joe's on the way back. Normal. Ordinary. The kind of Tuesday that wasn't supposed to change anything. But the moment I turned the ignition and the screen lit up, the GPS was already loaded with a recent route. And before I could even type in the dry cleaner's address, that little blue line was pointing somewhere that was not downtown, not his office on Meridian, not the gym on Fletcher Road he claimed to go to every Thursday night. The suggested destination on the screen read 4417 Callaway Drive. I knew that address. I knew it because 6 weeks earlier, when I had mentioned to Marcus that my coworker Diane lived somewhere in the Callaway Drive area, he had looked me dead in the eyes over our kitchen island and said, "Where even is Callaway Drive? I've never been anywhere near that part of town." He said it so easily, not defensively, not quickly. He just said it, picked up his coffee mug, and kept scrolling through his phone. Cool as January. I sat in the driveway for 4 minutes before I put the car back in park, took a breath, and typed the address into the GPS manually. And that's when the system asked me, "Would you like directions or view recent visits?" Recent visits. 11 times. 11 separate visits to 4417 Callaway Drive between October 14th and December 2nd. I turned the car off. I walked back inside. I made myself a cup of tea I never drank, and I sat at the kitchen table until my hands stopped shaking enough for me to think clearly. My name is Nora Callahan. I am 41 years old. I was married to Marcus Ellery for 14 years. We have a 12-year-old daughter named Piper and a 9-year-old son named Theo. I have a master's degree in communications that I have barely used since 2014, the year I cut back to part-time consulting so Marcus could take the regional director position at Hartwell Financial that required him to travel, his words, constantly. And I need you to understand something before I go any further. I was not a naive woman. I was not someone who missed signs. I was someone who chose, very deliberately and very carefully, to look at the life in front of her and believe in it. Because the alternative, the thing you're not supposed to let yourself imagine, was too devastating to hold in your hands for very long. Marcus was charming. That is the first thing you need to know about him. Not charming in a slick, obvious way. Charming in the way that makes you feel seen. He remembered things. He remembered that you liked the corner booth at restaurants. He remembered your mother's birthday. He brought Piper her favorite blueberry muffins from the bakery on Grove Street when she had a hard week at school. He coached Theo's soccer team on Saturday mornings with this whole-body enthusiasm that made other parents lean over to me and say, "You're so lucky." And I believed them. I was lucky. I had chosen correctly. I had the marriage that proved it was still possible to be a partner to someone in a real and lasting way. But there were things I noticed, if I'm being completely honest with myself. Small things I filed under stress or exhaustion, or the ordinary grinding distance that settles into long marriages like weather. He started sleeping with his phone face down in 2021. I noticed but said nothing. He began clearing his browser history every single night before bed. I would see him do it. That specific motion, settings, then history, then clear. And I told myself he was just private. Some people are private. It doesn't mean anything. He came home from the gym on 3 separate Thursdays with no visible sweat, hair dry, smelling faintly of something I could not immediately identify, something clean and slightly floral that was not his deodorant and was not anything in our bathroom. I filed it under, he probably just showered there. People shower at the gym. I was very good at filing things, but the GPS on his car was not so good at keeping secrets. After I finished my untouched tea, I did the thing I had never let myself do before. I went through his car completely, not hysterically, methodically. I opened the glove compartment and found the usual things: registration, insurance card, a granola bar wrapper, 2 gas receipts. But then I looked at the GPS history properly, beyond the suggested destination. I scrolled back through the full log. Callaway Drive, 11 times in 7 weeks. And not just late at night the way you might expect. Twice on a Wednesday afternoon, once on a Sunday morning when he told me he was meeting his college friend Brett for breakfast near the university. Once, and this one stopped me cold, on November 3rd, our 14th anniversary, the day I had made reservations at Oleander, the French restaurant where we'd had our first real date, and he had canceled at the last minute saying he had a work emergency, a client in crisis. He was so sorry. He would make it up to me. November 3rd. He had been at 4417 Callaway Drive instead. I took photographs of every entry on that GPS screen with my personal phone. Then I put everything back exactly as I had found it, drove to pick up the dry cleaning, stopped at Trader Joe's, and came home. I made pasta for dinner. I helped Theo with his math homework. I watched 40 minutes of television next to Marcus on the couch, his arm around my shoulder, and I did not say one single word. Because I had made a decision. And the decision was this: I was not going to confront him. Not yet. Not until I knew exactly what I was dealing with. Exactly who lived at 4417 Callaway Drive. And exactly how deep this went. Because here's what I had learned from watching other women in my life go through this. The ones who confronted immediately, who screamed and cried and demanded answers in the white-hot moment of discovery. Their husbands lied. Their husbands minimized. Their husbands had 3 days to delete and hide and rearrange before a lawyer was ever involved. And those women walked away with less than they deserved because they gave him a warning. I was not going to give Marcus Ellery a warning. I searched the property records for 4417 Callaway Drive the next morning, while he was at work and the kids were at school. It took me 11 minutes. The unit was a rental, a 1-bedroom apartment in a complex called the Meridian at Callaway. And yes, I noticed the irony that it shared a name with his office street. The renter of record was a woman named Cassandra Vaught, aged 27, employed, according to her LinkedIn profile I found in under 4 minutes, as a junior account coordinator at Hartwell Financial, Marcus's company. She had been working there for 2 years. I sat with that information for a long time. 27. She was 27 years old, and she worked for him. And my husband had been to her apartment 11 times in 7 weeks and had skipped our anniversary dinner to be with her. I want to tell you I cried. I did, eventually, but not that day. That day I felt something colder and more clarifying than grief. I felt the particular focus of a woman who has realized she has been underestimated. I called a family attorney named Renata Solis the following Monday. A friend of mine from my graduate program had used her in her own divorce 3 years prior and had described her as the kind of lawyer your husband should be terrified of. I liked that description. I made an appointment. Renata was small, composed, and had eyes that missed absolutely nothing. I brought her the GPS photographs, a printout of the property records, and a personal timeline I had written out on 3 pages of legal pad. She read everything without expression, and then looked up at me and said, "How much do you know about your joint finances?" And that, it turned out, was the right question. Because when Renata and I began to go through the financial records carefully, something I had largely left to Marcus during our marriage, which I will never forgive myself for, and which I will advise every woman I know for the rest of my life never to do. We found things. Between January and November of that year, Marcus had made 31 cash withdrawals from our joint savings account. Never more than $700 at a time. Always at different ATMs, always spaced out just enough not to trigger an automatic alert. The total across those 11 months was $16,400. $16,400 moved carefully and quietly out of the account we had built together for 14 years, in amounts small enough that I wouldn't notice if I wasn't looking closely. I had not been looking closely. He had also opened a credit card I did not know existed, using only his income as the qualifying base, and had carried a balance of $9,200 on it, much of which, when we later obtained the statements, appeared to be restaurant charges, hotel stays, and what I can only describe as a very consistent pattern of weekend getaways to a resort called the Glenwick Inn, about 2 hours outside the city. $25,600, roughly. That was the number Renata put on paper. That was what he had spent on Cassandra Vaught while I was raising our children, managing our home, covering for his absences, and believing the story he was telling me about his life. Renata filed the petition for divorce on a Thursday morning in December, timed specifically so that the documents would be served to Marcus at his office at Hartwell Financial, in front of his colleagues, on the same floor where Cassandra Vaught sat at her desk 20 feet from his. I was not present. I did not need to be. My sister called me at 11:43 a.m. that day to tell me that Marcus had tried to reach me 6 times from his cell phone in the preceding 20 minutes. I watched the calls come in. I let them go to voicemail, all 6 of them. The last message he left lasted 4 minutes. He cried through most of it. He said it wasn't what it looked like. He said Cassandra was a mistake, a terrible mistake, that she had pursued him, that he had been weak, that he loved me, that he loved the kids, that he needed to talk to me, that he could explain everything if I would just pick up the phone. "You're throwing away 14 years, he said at the end. His voice broke on the word years. I listened to that voicemail once, completely, and then I deleted it. Because here is what Marcus did not understand. He thought he was going to explain his way out of this. He thought that if he could just get me on the phone, just get me sitting across from him somewhere, he could do what he had always done. Be charming, be remorseful, make me feel like the love between us was bigger than this one terrible thing he had done. He had spent 14 years learning exactly what to say to me, but I had spent 14 years learning exactly what I was worth. The divorce proceedings took 8 months. Marcus hired an attorney who I'm sure cost him considerably, and who attempted, at various points, to argue that the financial withdrawals were for legitimate joint expenses, a claim that collapsed completely once Renata produced the Glenwick Inn receipts, a credit card statement showing flowers delivered to an apartment on Callaway Drive, and the testimony of 2 of Marcus's colleagues who confirmed that Cassandra Vaught had accompanied him on at least 4 business trips categorized as company expenses. He did not get to rewrite the numbers. I was awarded the house, full equity, no buyout. I was awarded primary custody of Piper and Theo, with structured visitation. I was awarded 7 years of spousal support, and I was awarded a financial settlement that included reimbursement of the $16,400 in undisclosed withdrawals, plus additional damages assessed by the court for financial concealment during the marriage. Marcus Ellery left the marriage with his personal clothing, his car, the one with the GPS that told me everything, and significantly less than half of what he thought he was walking away with. I heard through mutual friends several months later that Cassandra Vaught had ended things with him shortly after the divorce was filed. Apparently, the reality of a man actively losing a house, a retirement account, and the respect of everyone who knew him was less appealing than the version of him she had been spending weekends with at a resort. I cannot say I was surprised. It has been almost 2 years since that Tuesday morning in the driveway. Piper is thriving. Theo made the travel soccer team. I went back to full-time work, and I am better at my job than I have ever been, possibly because I am no longer spending emotional energy on a man who was spending his on someone else. I refinished the floors in the living room. I planted a garden in the backyard. Last spring, I took the kids to Portugal for 10 days, something Marcus had vetoed every single year of our marriage, for reasons that I now understand had nothing to do with money or scheduling. Some mornings I wake up in this house, my house, and I feel something I did not expect. Not anger, not grief, just a very quiet, very complete sense of peace. The kind that only comes when you finally stop carrying something that was never yours to carry. The last thing Marcus ever said to me directly, outside the courthouse after the final hearing, was, "I hope you're happy now." I looked at him for a moment. This man I had loved, this man who had stood next to me at an altar, this man who had held both of our children minutes after they were born and wept with something that looked, at the time, entirely like joy. And I said, "I will be." I walked to my car, I drove home, and I was right.